What is the quickest way you've seen someone fuck their life up? This happened in a 2-week period. A friend of mine lost his kitchen job due to layoffs. Looked in the paper for a job he could get quick, so he can make his bills, rent, etc. Finds a listing for a company looking for a driver/delivery person ASAP. He has a car, so he figures it would be a good quick fix. Calls and gets the job over the phone, and is told he starts the next evening. Gets a company cell phone, and does his first pickup. Turns out it's an escort agency and he's picking up and dropping off the talent. Does this for a few nights and starts getting to know the girls. Turns out they're all addicted to crack. Big surprise. They get the idea in his head that he's doing all the groundwork, so he might as well post the ads himself and get his own phone, and they'll work for him. So we're about a week into this adventure and he's gone from line cook to pimp. Fast forward a couple of days into pimping, and he comes to the conclusion that all these girls spend their money on his crack, so why not cut out the middleman and start paying them in what they want? He doesn't know where to get crack, but his kitchen buddies can hook him up with coke. Gets a bag of coke and googles how to make crack. Yes, really. Whips up a batch of kitchen crack and then is concerned that maybe he didn't make it correctly, so logically he should try it first before giving it to his ladies. 36-hour crack binge later, he's hooked and proceeds to sell off everything including the car and phone in the next few days. I dropped by his place to hang out around day 10. I had no idea any of this was going on. He meets me at the door, explains what he's been up to for the past few days, and says he doesn't want me there unless I'd like to pay and hook up with one of the crackheads in his living room. Strangely, I declined. Last time I saw him, he was cracked out yelling at people for change on a downtown street. 14 days and his entire life turned to garbage. At a party with a friend. I didn't know her friends well. Someone offers us heroin and I want to leave. She on the other hand has a crush on the guy and wants to stay. She assures me she isn't interested in trying it. I try to talk her out of it and to just leave with me, but no. Plus I'm starting to get cheat for being lame and I want out. The last thing she said to me before I left was, "You're a faking drag and a terrible friend." I told her, if worrying for her and my safety made me a drag and a bad friend, that I was okay with it. She died that night. So did he. Bat was laced with fentanyl, and they both did. Edit. Lots of comments. Thank you all. I'm not okay that those were our last words exchanged. I will always feel there was more I could've done, the same way I feel that pang when I see a homeless person or there is some horrible tragedy. Just part of the emotions of life. I know I had our best interests at heart and simply didn't have the life experience to know how to handle it past what I did. I did pretty well considering that. I'm okay now. This was almost 10 years ago, and I've been through counseling, and no, it was not my fault. It's just never ever going to be a situation I can feel totally at peace about, and that's okay too. Some things just suck. My mom's friend's foster daughter was about a month from graduating high school. She was a straight A student, and she had a bright and promising future ahead of her. As far as anyone knew, she was a perfect good girl. But literally the day she turned 18, she disappeared. Her mom thought the worst, like she'd been kidnapped or killed. She didn't hear from her at all for about 2 weeks. The cops were looking for her, but turning up nothing. Then one day she walks in the front door like nothing happened. As it turns out, on her 18th birthday, and the subsequent couple weeks, she dropped out of school. Got a really ugly tattoo that covers a large portion of the side of her torso. Moved in a house with a couple guys, which it was later found out that they were having gangbangs with her every day. Blew a bunch of money on drugs then, when her mother yelled at her for making her worry, and for doing so much retarded shit, she freaked out on her mom and left again that same day, disappearing for another several weeks. She came back to collect some of her things and decided she was moving across the country to live with her crackhead real mother that she was taken away from as a baby and never had anything to do with for her entire life. Today, roughly 5 years later, she has 2 babies from different dads, never went to college and works at Walmart. She could have done anything she wanted, but she decided to fuck up everything and go partying instead of just staying in school one more month. I know someone who did something similar. This kid, I'll call him Joe, was a total prodigy. He has a twin brother I'll call James, and they were both always really kind and smart, but Joe was clearly the smarter one. Not that James wasn't smart, but Joe was way too smart for a kid his age. My classmates and I suspected that he might have some form of autism because he was so smart and pretty socially awkward, much more than James, who was by all accounts pretty normal. They went to a different high school than me, so I kind of lost touch with both of them. Fast forward to college, I see a Facebook post from James apologizing for Joe's behavior. I vaguely remembered then that near the end of high school Joe had sent me some weird messages on Facebook and then blocked me, but it was so random and benign that I didn't remember what he had said. So I messaged James, asking what was going on. Turns out, Joe started doing synthetic drugs like spice and turned into a completely different person, sending people awful, threatening messages and constantly causing trouble with others. Shortly after, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Whether or not those two things are related, I have no idea, but the whole thing is really sad. Joe had so much potential, and now it seems very unlikely that he will amount to anything. So not a permanent fuck up, but I've had 4 friends ruin their life over WoW. Kind of a happy ending, I guess, for very close friends of mine all graduated high school at the same time. They all went to college. I joined the Marine Corps. We were all nerds, and were all familiar with MMOs and Blizzard. WoW had really started getting hot, but there was just no faking way I could play it, but they all started. This was 2006ish. Fast forward 8 years. I had finished my enlistment and went to college. Me and 2 of those guys are graduating college together with our bachelors. Another one never went back, and the 4th one had to join the Navy because he failed so many classes that his debt was astronomical and he couldn't get back into school. The culprit? WoW. These guys were putting in 12 hours a day 4 years on that game. They all failed, all dropped out, all had to pick up the pieces years later after they got their lives back on track. They're all doing well now. None of us, myself included, will touch MMORPGs seriously. If you see your life headed down the drain because of an MMO, make changes. These guys lost 4 years of their lives over essentially nothing. Edit. All of the replies and stories everybody is telling are incredible and often sobering. I wish I could reply to all of them, but I'm at work. I'm reading them all though. Please accept my apologies. Obligatory edit. Thanks for the gold. It took 14 years to get to the point I could write this TLDR, and I appreciate everyone's concern and comments. Please consider donating to your local domestic violence shelter. I was very lucky to have the military keeping me safe and moving me across the country afterward. Very few women have any resources except the clothes they ran out the house with. Assuming they got out alive. Extremely late to the party. Take out $35,000 credit card debt for online porn. Pay the interest by borrowing from a Chicago gang. Not tell his wife he's bisexual before she finds it. Take out a big insurance policy on her while she's in Iraq thinking she'll die, and he'll have $1 mil to pay the card and the gang and live well. She doesn't die in Iraq, so he tries to strangle her while she's cooking dinner. He breaks her hand, but she chokes him out and escapes. He tries to fight police. He then tries to punch judges. Got 2 days for that, but his mama knows the judges, so the attempted murder as the domestic violence and the battery charges are dropped. Then he hides in the woods to avoid the process server for the divorce, so he then threatens, in writing, to kill the now ex-wife's Zoan Chaplin, except now it's wartime, so they throw him in the brig for military charges instead of civilian charges, so mama can't buy him free. And in the brig he brags to everyone about how he tried to kill a sailor by flooding a ship's compartment years ago, so he gets charges of 1 sabotage, 2 attempted murders, 2 threatening murder, and all sort of lesser charges, dishonorable discharge, and just got out 14 years later. He managed all this in just 4 months. Source: I'm the ex-wife. So not so much bad as it was sad. This happened around 2006 to 2008. Can't remember exactly when, cause I was about 11 at the time. I had a friend in elementary school and middle school that lived within 2 miles from me, and a CVS between our houses. Her, 12 years old, her little brother, 9 years old, and her mother, 40ish, were at CVS picking up a few things and were walking to their car in the parking lot. Apparently as they were walking, the mother pushed both my friend and her brother away from her. My friend hit her head on the sidewalk and woke up to her brother screaming and crying. What happened was that as they were walking, the mother noticed a car that was slamming on the gas while trying to back out of a parking spot. The car was heading straight towards them, and the mother pushed the kids out of the way. Car pinned the mother to the wall of the CVS, and she died within minutes. The little brother saw the whole thing happen and has been struggling with depression and traumatic PTSD since, and my friend got a concussion from the incident, lost her mother, and has never been the same. Sad thing is that the driver wasn't drunk or high or anything. It was a tiny little 80-year-old lady that wasn't used to driving the car and pressed too hard on the gas pedal. Don't exactly know what happened when the police got involved, but my friend has been messed up ever since. This forum has had a lot of comments about terrible people that have done terrible things. Not all bad things happen because of bad people. Sometimes they just happen. Edit. Thank you for the gold. This was my second post ever on Reddit, and it was important for me to share. Thank you. There was a kid, we'll call him Jerry, I went to school with who I thought was a perfectly nice guy. Jerry was kind of known as the flamboyant gay kid in my school. He was good at school, had lots of friends, was well known in the community, and had just recently been accepted to an extremely good college. Just a few weeks ago Jerry went to a party and intentionally got a 17-year-old kid so drunk and high that he passed out. Once the kid fell asleep, this guy wrapped him and took pictures of the entire process while making faces and peace signs at the camera. The kid freaked out when he woke up and realized what happened. The police were immediately called. The police took Jerry's DNA and phone for evidence and quickly found over 150 nude pictures of underage boys from our local high school and all of the pictures of Jerry wrapping this poor kid at a party. Jerry is only 18 and now faces charges for rape of an unconscious victim, rape of a minor, possession of child pornography, and multiple cases of sexual assault. Right now it looks like he will serve a minimum of 5 years in prison, but it is likely to be more. Edit. Apparently more rape victims have recently stepped forward, so he may be even more fake than he was before. I had the pleasure of meeting the kindest person I've ever met. He came from a really snobby and popular family, but he was friends with literally everyone. He would hang out with the outcasts. He would actually come over if you posted online about how you were lonely. He didn't care at all about high school politics. I met him once, and he made a significant impact on my life. He was just genuine about being fair and nice to everyone he met. He had every chance to be a dick given that he was smart, good looking, came from a wealthy family, but nope. He gave off this huge sense of peace when you were around him. If I had to describe the second coming of Jesus, it was him. A year after meeting him, he ends up missing for 3 days. Eventually the story unfolds that he was at a party the night he went missing, but he was the DD for everyone, so it was odd that he just suddenly left before anyone else did. 3 days later, my brother finds him on an old logging road in his pickup, head blasted off with a shotgun. He had apparently taken shrooms and wanted to meet God. His family found his Bible, and it was filled with highlighted passages about heaven and the soul finding peace with Jesus. I'm guessing that the church he went to had a lot to do with it. It was the kind where everyone affluent and popular goes to, but given that they were disgusting people, they didn't seem to practice what they preached. The evil go to hell, but not us, because we are here on Sunday. At his funeral, the pastor had the gall to say he went to hell since he committed a sin by killing himself. That kind of church. I really miss you, Stevie. Thank you for showing me the single bit of kindness I ever found in that town. Very weird one here. Without going into too much detail, this was a single dad who ran a youth club. The other staff tried to hush this up, but his kids were integrated into the main social group here, so it got out pretty quickly. He was fairly religious, adamant that his 15-year-old daughter was not to have a boyfriend, never let her have boys over, even as friends. She of course had a boyfriend who came over during the gap between end of school and when he got home from work. He suspected it, but couldn't prove it. So he installed a webcam in her bedroom. Of course, he caught her having sex with this guy on film, downloaded it to his computer to show to his daughter as proof, so he could discipline her. She obviously immediately freaks out, calls her mum, who calls the police. Social workers arrive. Guy get done for child pornography, currently going through the court system, has been forced to leave the youth club and hasn't seen his kids for almost a year. The brother revealed all of this to one of his friends. You know how kids are. Word spread. Poor guy was always very odd. I would say on the spectrum definitely. I genuinely believe he didn't realize what he had done. He just viewed it as parenting. Lost his kids, his job, his social life through the staff at the youth club, the respect of the community, and probably his freedom all in one stupid mistake. Ex-coworker with a fairly average background rose through the ranks and went from a guy making an average income to $100K in a matter of 3 or so years. Very frugal, tons of savings, nice apartment, nice car, had a super cute girlfriend. One day I contacted him out of the blue. No response. I kept trying with no luck. Months later his girlfriend finally calls me and says basically he's currently in jail, but wouldn't tell me why. Eventually I looked him up on the county court site and saw that he was in for statutory rape of his 9-year-old female cousin. The charges included sodomy under threat of violence or something like that. In pre-trial, the prosecutor had the little cousin testify that he ruined her life. His lawyer convinced him to take a plea deal for a 14-year sentence instead of going to trial, where if he loses, it would have been a life sentence. He was around 30 at the time of getting locked up. This guy was one of the most tech-savvy guys I knew. Had the latest and greatest gaming consoles, electronics, etc. His girlfriend left him soon after. All his savings wiped out. He's now locked up 6 hours from any family. His poor mother has to drive that far to visit his ass. I visited once, but decided I didn't really want to make so much effort with a guy that was accused of such a heinous crime against a child. Friend of mine I got to know living when I was living in Shanghai, China. I was probably the first North American expat he met there. He was from Colorado, got new and fast money when he was young. I was 27, and he was fresh out of university at 23 with an MBA, with no knowledge of how to hold, spend, or invest it. But he knew it all. Got a great job managing a bunch of small highly automated plants that made parts for the cell phone base stations. Danger pay twice a year, paid big in the US. So he had to go to Hong Kong to get cash every month to spend a month off in the summer with plane ticket, Christmas plane ticket back home too, a driver, and a paid apartment. He started to hang out with a dodgy Australian guy and another American guy who were manhos. I worked in the same office as those two did, but I left for greener pastures before they got stupider and would start a fight at the drop of a hat. I warned him a few times to stay away from those guys, because though clean shaven and the life of the party, they had nothing to lose. Admittedly, I was kind of boring, but I knew my limits and made sure I could walk home or get out of a bad situation at least. Sure enough, he got into a fight with a couple of locals over a girl at one of the expat bars. Now local Chinese back then rarely went to those bars unless they had the cash to spend, and usually those guys were connected somehow. Well, he and the other two punched out the wrong bunch of guys, sent one guy to the hospital. They promptly got arrested and had the book, volumes 1 through 5, thrown at them. We did get them out a day later with a lot of connections getting used up. My old office boss who I liked called me up to ask if I could help by being in attendance and had me call up a few other people. It was bad. Before it became something that would require more finessing, we made deals, otherwise they'd still be in there probably. Their visas were torn up and they were told to leave the country. Bye bye sweetest job. I had played EverQuest for years, but eventually switched to WoW after being in open beta. My two friends and I got into it in high school. My friend Jay and I were cool and played often but not obsessively. We had to guide our friend T through everything, like looking up and down and moving. Literally every step. We played together for a few weeks, but I was busy with swimming, and our friend T, who had a dad in jail and lived with his grandma, had nothing else. He quickly blew past us and it consumed his life inside of a few weeks. This was junior year. By senior year, he had about 4 or 5 months left, and he dropped out, and I never saw him again except for one time. Coming back home from college, I saw him on the street wearing the same hoodie he wore throughout middle and high school every single day. I pulled over and asked him what he was up to. Oh, you know, still playing WoW. I'm manager at McDonald's though. Just trying to make enough money to eat and keep playing. And off he walked to the McDonald's on the worst side of town. I'd never felt so horrible. I feel like I introduced him to crack, walked him through the process, and dumped him off to suffer his addiction alone. I feel so responsible for his outcome and he'll never know. A kid at my school odd on heroin, but hold on, it gets deeper. I went middle school with this kid and played on the same baseball team as him for a while. He was always that kid that hung with the wrong crowd, but was a good guy, and he was incredibly good at baseball. So good that he had a few scholarship offers in his junior year. He was always trying to make people laugh and lend a helping hand to whoever needed it. Nobody that knew him had a bad thing to say about him. At some point he started getting into harder and harder drugs and eventually turned to heroin. I met his mom a handful of times and she was as nice as he was. I heard rumors of his stepdad being abusive, so this may explain why he turned to it. After about half a year on the drug, he decided to change his life around and get his shit together. He started dating a very nice girl that was nothing like his normal group of friends, and she helped him out tremendously. She was honestly heaven sent for him, and the only reason he got off it initially. Around the first week back from winter break, he got into an argument with a friend of his, and they almost fought. For some reason he decided to relapse and texted his old dealer for some H. The dealer called up the kid that he was arguing with and said, "Hey man, if you two are still arguing, I can give him something dirty." The kid replied, "Give him some dirty shit." He died that night and died. The autopsy says that he had ingested 100% fentanyl. I used to work at a little diner in Constance Bay, Ontario. I imagine I could find an article about this. Didn't happen to me, but to a customer. I would estimate that it was about 10 years ago now. The customer, female, and her boyfriend were out drinking at the local watering hole. There was that bar in the Legion in the little town. Anyway, her and her boyfriend had driven to the bar, and when they left, they did the smart thing and left their car at the bar and decided to walk home. Constance Bay is quite small. Basically it's a main road that loops around the whole town and all side roads branch off of that. The main road has a really sharp turn at one spot. So her and her boyfriend are walking on the side of the road. No sidewalks since it's a little town. Everyone literally knows everyone. As they're walking, a guy hits them. The driver was wasted drunk. He had been cut off at the Legion a while before the incident. Her and her boyfriend were hit so hard, they were thrown into the ditch. Her boyfriend was killed instantly, and she was severely hurt. She laid in the ditch for a few hours, unable to move until someone driving by noticed a hand sticking up. 911 was called. She had a couple of surgeries after. If I recall, they had to put a metal rod in her leg. So, after drunk idiot hits them, he keeps driving and takes the sharp curve I mentioned too fast and ends up hitting the garage of a house on the corner. This wakes up the owners of the house, who didn't think too much of it, as apparently this was a common occurrence. Thing is, the owners of the house were the parents of the girl who had just gotten hit. I remember hearing how shook up and guilty they felt when they found out what happened. So, drunk guy was caught and charged, obviously. I guess he was known in the area. His stupid decision not only ruined his life, but the lives of the girl, her boyfriend and their friends and family. It was pretty sad. She would come into the diner for breakfast and I remember seeing the massive brace she had on her leg. Fact drunk driver's edit. I tried googling it. Can't exactly remember the year, and I keep coming up with another article about another couple that were hit in 2012. In this one, the woman, a mother of 2, was killed dead. It too found it. I apologize, I misremembered some of the details. This article discussing the conviction and the fact that the driver got. I've watched a handful of people I went to school ruin their lives over time. First was a guy that grew up down the street from me. The day I got my driver's license, he asked if I wanted to hang out, but I declined because my mom required that I go look for a job to pay for car insurance, gas, etc. He and two other girls from school decided to see how fast their cars would go on rough back roads. They hit some gravel or something, lost control, went through metal cattle fencing, and ended up suspended in some trees. The girl in the backseat ended up with 2 broken wrists. The girl that was driving lost her left arm to just below her shoulder, and my friend's neck was broken, which killed him instantly. His life was gone. The driver's life was never the same. She never learned either. She kept wrecking car after car for years and faced no consequences because both parents were cops. His mom attempted suicide multiple times and was never the same. Second was another friend from school in the grade below me. He was always a big overweight dude, but we stopped hanging out after graduation because he started getting in with a shady crowd. Over the span of a couple of months, he turned into this super skinny stick person because he started screwing with a lot of drugs. He spent most of his time since HS graduation working at Subway. We are in our mid to late 20s now, can't afford anything or maintain a job, and lost a lot of his upper teeth, so he now has dentures. Still like the guy, just wish he could get out of the harder drugs. He had a lot of potential and was incredibly smart, but it all went to waste. I hope he ends up doing better for himself. Third was a really awkward dude from high school. He always came off like a 70-year-old man in a teen's body by how he acted and rest, even had orthopedic like old man shoes. Some of the girls I was friends with for a while in school talked him into asking one of my friends to a dance or prom, insisted that she liked him a lot and really wanted him to ask her out, even though they knew she had a boyfriend. He asked, she laughed in his face, all ashamed and embarrassed. Fast forward a few years, until about 2015, and I get this link, actually from the guy in the previous story, about this awkward guy getting arrested. He was arrested for having a 100 plus of kiddie born images, 5,500 internet searches for kiddie born, a list of kids he'd messed with ranging in ages from toddlers to teens, and keeping a detailed diary/log of what he did, and they were all from his church. I kept up with the case, which was finally settled a few months ago. If he serves his full sentence, he'll get out when we are in our mid-50s. Edit, corrected minor details in story 3 and to provide a couple of links. Link 1, link 22nd edit to add another story. Guy I hung out with for a few months in 2010 ended up killing his best friend, his best friend's girlfriend, and sent several other people at a party to the hospital, and he wasn't even at the party. He and his best friend decided to buy this drug from a sketchy Chinese website. They thought they were getting something called TCE, but might have been sent something else called Bromo Dragonfly. Plan was to mix this stuff up in some water, sell it by the capful, think cap of a water bottle, for $20 each, make some money and let everyone have a good time. He ordered it, mixed it up, sent it with his best friend and his best friend's girlfriend to the party. Then he went to work. His friends went to the party, started selling it, then shit went south. Best friend's girlfriend started hallucinating and having seizures. The 911 call that was released had her screaming in the background and she ended up dying. His friend made it to the hospital, but ended up on life support, which was later removed after finding no brain activity. Several others ended up in the hospital for a while. He ended up in prison for a few years, then got out and struggles to support himself and family. Never found out for sure if he was sent the right or wrong drug, but it came down to either A, he mixed it wrong for the TCE he got, or B, he mixed it right for 2CE, but the amount of added water wasn't sufficient for the other drug he might have received instead. Company to cut costs throws a Christmas party luncheon in the boardroom. Various people get annual awards of large bottles of scotch, vodka, etc. About 30 people in attendance. At 4ish the manager leaves because of family obligations. The bottles come out. 1. Married. Guy goes nuclear on the booze. Hits on our staff lawyer, also married, groping her and whatnot. We stop that stuff as a group and walk him to the elevator with taxi money, and off he goes. A lawyer, a nice lady, says not to worry, she brushed it off. So we all just agree it didn't happen. The guy was away on vacation starting the next day. So we get midway through the week and management starts asking what really happened that night. We were all in the hot seat for not reporting it. Turns out the guy didn't get into a cab, he got into his car. Luckily he bottomed his car out on parking curbs after running the parking gate. Couldn't figure out how to use his parking pass to get the gate to lift. He wakes up in the drunk tank mid-morning. His wife and kids already left for Disney on the 5-hour flight. He lost his license, soon divorced his wife. I think it was the last straw. In my line of work you need to report things like criminal convictions etc. point within 24 hours to the regulator. So he lost his job. Wife kept the house and the dog. In 2005, when I was 18, I faked up my life and my brother-in-law's life when I decided to drive us home from a party drunk. We were T-boned by a truck and he passed away on impact. I survived, but my life was in shambles. My sister lost her husband, my nephew lost his dad, and I lost my best friend. I was also prosecuted for homicide by vehicle. So instead of accepting my full ride scholarship to college I accepted my state-issued oranges. Instead of a 6-figure salary office job I barely get, by busting my ass doing manual labor. Instead of a joyous happy carefree life I've been battling alcoholism, depression and PTSD. All because I had a god complex, thinking I was untouchable, that I could live above the rules because they didn't pertain to me. It's hard to face that you aren't the exception to the rule, but rather the reason for it. As much as I can look back at my life and say it was ruined that night, the simple fact is I'm still lucky enough to have good days. Hell, I'm lucky enough to just have days remaining. My brother-in-law wasn't that lucky. So while my life might have suffered, it is his and his family's whose have been ruined. My ex-wife. We had a pretty good marriage overall, never fought, got along well, the bills were paid. I was happy if she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. But she was a lazy sloth who slept all day and was getting worse as she got older, and I was losing my patience. Rather than deal with my nagging to get off her, as while I worked like a dog, she hooked up with some ex-boyfriend from high school and left me. She took $100K with her ex-boyfriend, now new boyfriend, turned out to be a coke-sucking bum. She rented a massive country home, bought a boat, a new car, and sat around drinking and doing coke all day. We never did drugs when we were together. She blew the $100K in 5 months, gave me the kids full time, and moved 45 minutes away with a new loser boyfriend where they both collected welfare and lived in a trap house. One night, he blacks out, thinks she's a prostitute he hired, and gets enraged when she refused sex with him. He beat her, threw darts into her back as she ran away, naked, into the streets. He gets in her, uninsured, car, drives off, and rolls it into a canal. Somehow he survived. She left because he was in jail and she couldn't support herself, and now she's with another unemployed welfare bum who left his pregnant girlfriend for her, wears biker patches, but has no bike, and likes to get drunk and send me rambling texts. So in the span of 1 year, she threw away her marriage, kids, all her friends, middle class life, $100K, and developed a wicked cocaine addiction. All because I wanted the house clean when I came home.